Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, October 1, 2025. Time in Texas about 10 a.m. I'd like to say thank you to Jonelle Enterprises for extra support for my channel. I have a subscribe button in the lower right corner of my screen. Thanks for like, subscribe, and share, for hitting the like button. That helps my channel to grow. Some of the sources I'll use today: God in the Bible, Patriot subscribers. From Steve Quayle's Aggregate site, Express, Wine Press, Colonel Davis, Deep Dive, Hal Turner, Breitbart, Plus. Some of the things we'll cover: President Trump preps for Nesara and a Mideast strike, and also the government shutdown brought about by the commie Dems, and Charlie Kirk, the usual suspects. The U.S. military is sending refuelers and fighter jets to the Middle East. So look for that Middle East to go hot very soon. So I'm going to begin with the tropics. We still have Imelda and Umberto, but they're both turning back to the east. Now, there was significant shore damage. I saw some beach houses destroyed, floating out into the ocean along Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. So Imelda has caused damage. We have this from YouTube, Space Weather, formerly Suspicious Observers. We now have a solar storm hitting the Earth with the winds at 1.7 million miles per hour. And they are causing a KP index of 4, which means we would have auroras in the upper Arctic and Antarctic areas. In the Philippines, we've had a 6.9 earthquake. I understand, tragically, dozens of people have passed away. It was very shallow, 10 kilometers or 6 miles. And we can expect the solar wind to bring about auroras, and also expect, according to Ben Davidson, a solar flash when the electromagnetic shield around the Earth goes to zero. I agree with Ben Davidson. We are in the process of a pole shift. Now, he brings about an interesting white paper science paper where experiments have been done, what to expect the impact on when the pole shift, the electromagnetic shield around the Earth goes to zero and we have solar flashes, what would be the impact on life? And according to this, scientists worked with bacteria and took the electromagnetic force on the bacteria down to zero, hit it with a UV light flash, and what happened was the bacteria became super bacteria. So if we extrapolate this and apply it to human life, what's going to happen when the electromagnetic shield goes to zero? And I personally believe, based on my research, that would only last about 30 minutes. And then the dynamo inside the Earth would restart. We would have a flip of the north and south magnetic poles. But if we can use this experiment to indicate what would be the effect on human life when that occurs, and it appears it would be beneficial. So that's going on. And we have this. So we have, from the National Hurricane Center, we have Umberto at 90 miles per hour, Imelda at 80 miles per hour, but they're both shifting dramatically east, away from the U.S. We have had overnight a government shutdown brought about by the communist Dems. So we have the government shutdown. Now, people who receive money from the government on a regular basis, Social Security, disability, veterans benefits, and so on, that continues. And also, the U.S. military is fully funded in a previous budget passed by the Congress. So we're not going to see an impact on our daily lives. We know fire and police are funded not by the federal government, but by state and local sources. So what we are going to see, it appears, is 100,000 possible resignations of what President Trump calls non-essential government workers. And this happened last night at midnight. It's because the Dems would not vote to pass a budget because the Republicans would not allow the Dems to include $1.5 trillion for aid for illegals. So that's going on. And they wanted also to reverse the Dems, the commie Dems wanted to reverse all of President Trump's cuts in the federal government. The Dems are communist. And we have this, the government shutdown. Yeah. The essential services for America, U.S. military, FBI, DEA, these Border Patrol, and other agencies that protect us will continue. So that's going on. So if you're an American who still self-identifies as a Dem, the question is, why? And we have this, Charlie Kirk assassination. We now know that the FBI, Kash Patel, is straight up lying to the American people. Kirk assassination. But it's coming out more and more that Kirk, the usual suspects are involved. As we've seen assassinations in the U.S. before, President Kennedy, his brother RFK, MLK, those two recent attempts on President Trump. Yes, traitors inside certain government agencies were involved in those recent assassination attempts on President Trump. And more than likely, they would like nothing better than to be successful in taking out President Trump. This includes the CIA, FBI, NSA, Homeland Security, foreign nations including Israel, Iran, China, Russia, Cuba, the same groups that are foreign nations that were involved in the presidential election coup of 2020. Now, do I mean that every single employee of the FBI, CIA, NSA, and so on, Homeland Security, is a traitor? No. But how many does it take? The CIA won't even tell the American people how many employees they have, but it's predicted to be tens of thousands. So we do have traitors inside the CIA and FBI who I believe directly brought about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We see Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, now lying straight up on TV to the faces of American people. It's obvious to American citizens, and I believe that's 50 to 80% of the American public, that Tyler Robinson did not assassinate Charlie Kirk, and that Tyler Robinson is simply the fall guy for the FBI, as we've seen in the past with Oswald Sirhan, and most recently with President Trump, a guy named Crook. So that's going on, yeah. And their effort, and the reason they took out Charlie Kirk is because he had begun to move away from a Zionist position, saying Israel can do anything it wants. And by taking out Charlie Kirk, it was an effort by the CIA and FBI to control American people in their support for Israel primarily. So yeah, and this is coming out. The CIA, Tyler Robinson was a CIA asset. He was in the CIA college program. And it's coming out on Redacted. The CIA targets universities to bring in recruits for the CIA, and that involved in the Charlie Kirk assassination, FBI, CIA, MI6 from the UK, Mossad from Israel, and so on. So, and NATO. NATO is also generally actively involved in assassinations. We have this from Dr. William Mount. Kash Patel lies to Congress about the FBI and J6 involvement of the FBI. Yes, Kash Patel is a liar. He is lying to the American people about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He's also straight up lying to Congress about the FBI involvement in J6. As I brought out on a previous video, documents have come out and information supporting my statement that up to 300 FBI had infiltrated the American people in Washington, D.C. on J6 and led the push of the American people into the Capitol where the doors were open. It was in no way an insurrection by the American people. It was a lying, cheating, stealing, killing effort by the FBI to simulate an insurrection by the American people. And Kash Patel, straight up, has lied to Congress about the FBI being involved. So I say this to Kash Patel: shut up. And we have this. Yeah, up to 100,000 government employee resignations is expected during this government shutdown. People who are not needed. And we have this from BPEARTHWATCH. Yeah, 100,000 government employees expected to resign. And President Trump had put in place a resignation program for government employees that expired September 30. So it's highly likely that since the government shutdown came at midnight last night, September 30, it's unknown how many government employees took advantage of President Trump's deferred resignation program. So that's a resignation program where they could continue to receive salary and benefits for a certain number of months. We have this from Colonel Davis Deep Dive. Now we know that we've just had a generals meeting, first time in American history, where we had 650 to 900 generals, admirals, commanders meeting at Quantico Marine Base in Virginia on Tuesday. President Trump spoke there, as did Pete Hegseth. Now, it's believed that what we publicly saw a rah-rah speech for the military was simply for public consumption. It's believed that the U.S. military, it's my assessment that they now prep to actually go to warlike levels in the Middle East and in Venezuela. And I had put out that apparently the U.S. military communication system has been compromised. So the primary reason for bringing all these generals and plus to a meeting face-to-face was to convey secret war plans. And President Trump spoke, and he said, the U.S. is 25 years ahead of Russia and China in their development of subs, and that recently Russia made a direct threat to the U.S., and that's when President Trump sent 2 U.S. military nuclear subs to certain points. So this is the first we're hearing that Russia made a direct threat to the U.S. And President Trump says U.S. subs are undetectable. So that's going on. So we see new information coming out. And we have this from President Trump also during a speech to the generals plus, that in the last 8 months, U.S. military recruitment has dramatically increased, and that all 4 branches have met their recruitment goals by 106%. So that's going on. Yeah. And that the U.S. military is ruthless and relentless. And I have put out, I believe the U.S. military is the greatest in history. We have this from Colonel Davis, Deep Dive. Now, certain things are going on. We know that the deep state controls mainstream media. They also control many influencers on the internet also. So this is going on, that President Trump now is pushing back on the DOJ, Pam Bondi and her number 2, Peter Tickton, who is a high school friend of President Trump since high school. President Trump is pushing back hard on Bondi and Tickton to bring indictments, and that recent indictment against Comey was made by direct pressure on Bondi by President Trump. So it should come as no surprise if Pam Bondi is soon replaced. And we've had defense leaks inside the U.S. to foreign nations. And that goes along with my assessment that the U.S. military communication system has been hacked. And that was one of the reasons for the generals' meeting. We have this from WERX. Okay. Now, it is my opinion that the U.S. military preps for warlike events in the Middle East and also Venezuela. And to support that, we have this information, WERX. In the last 5 days, we've had 601 C-17s. Those are large cargo planes designed to carry troops and equipment. moving to the Middle East and Europe. Now, it's put forth an exercise will take place in the UK September 30 to October 2 called Cobra Warrior. And WERX also puts this forth that one of the reasons for the generals meeting is a purge. And that's also very likely. It's believed, we recall the Chinese ties of General Milley and the last administration are so. So it's believed that we have generals, admirals, commanders who are also aligned with foreign nations and are traitors. So a purge is very likely. Plus, the U.S. military has more generals, admirals, and commanders than it really needs strategically. We have this. President Trump is also putting forth a peace plan in the Middle East. So President Trump is putting forth peace in the Middle East. And we saw recently Israel hit Qatar, a U.S. ally, to kill the Hamas representatives involved in a peace talk. Israel does not want peace. Now, it's not the Israeli people, but it's definitely the deep state-controlled Israeli government. And President Trump has put forth a peace plan that calls for President Trump to be the chairman of a peace board that would govern peace in Gaza, and security would be put forth by Muslim nations. Now we see, in line with these expected U.S. military efforts against the Middle East and Venezuela, and President Trump's peace plan, he's also putting forth a way to take down more traitors inside the U.S. And we see a buildup in Washington, D.C. In D.C., we see President Trump bringing in 2,000 National Guard armed, supposedly to manage crime in the streets. President Trump is also bringing in JAGs, that's U.S. military attorneys. And it's believed President Trump then will bring about tribunals, which will be U.S. military trials. It's obvious, as I've just stated, it appears that the DOJ, Bondi, and others are somewhat compromised. So this will be the roundup of deep state players who will be labeled enemy combatants, including terrorists and saboteurs. Didn't we just see saboteurs, terrorists inside the FBI and CIA assassinate Charlie Kirk? I believe we did. And President Trump now is setting up Washington, D.C. as a location to bring in the deep state. So that's going on. And we have this. I mean, I laugh when people come out and criticize President Trump for this or that. I look at them as being less than patriotic. We have this from CHRISTEFEROU. He's a European journalist. Benjamin Netanyahu visited the White House recently. And Benjamin Netanyahu apologized for Israel's hit on a U.S. ally, Qatar. And President Trump put forth his 20-point peace plan in Gaza, and included are some points: the IDF will be out of Gaza, security will be provided by Muslim nations, and there are many differences between Israel and President Trump's plan. President Trump will be the chairman of the peace board governing Gaza, and Tony Blair will also be on the board. So that's going on. And we have this from Judge Napolitano, a recent interview with Scott Ritter. President Trump will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. And technically, legally, as my understanding, the West Bank is still part of Syria. But we see Syria headed up now by a terrorist, al-Jilani. So, this and that. And Tony Blair will be on the peace board. And the U.S. is not giving Tomahawks to Ukraine because the Tomahawk missiles can only be operated by the U.S. military. So if President Trump gives Tomahawks to Ukraine, that would mean the U.S. military would be operating them in direct hits on Russia. So Tomahawks are a no-go. And we have this. And the generals meeting, we're seeing, I believe, a purge plus secret war plans being given out. Now, we have this from Hal Turner, that just yesterday, that'll be September 30, I had reported previously, we've had many refuelers going to Europe and the Middle East in the past 5 days. Just yesterday, we had dozens more refuelers going to the Middle East, plus each was accompanied by 5 to 10 U.S. fighter jets. And they are currently basing in Qatar. So that's going on. Most possibly for another strike on Iran. We have this from Express News. So there's been a problem with, President Trump was putting out at the generals meeting how great U.S. subs are. So we have the UK, we have Africa, we have the Strait of Gibraltar. We had, in the past few days, a Russian stealth sub that has had to surface, and it's unknown whether it's armed with nukes or not, but it is in danger of exploding due to a leak in its fuel system. Diesel is flowing into the hold, and it's being reported that no one on the sub, which is called the Novorossiysk submarine. No one on the submarine knows how to repair it, nor are parts available on the sub to report it. So it's also near Portugal. And the problem is the fuel leak, yeah, and it could possibly explode. And we have several nations sending ships to shadow this Russian sub that's now on the surface, right about in this area, from France and Spain, and U.S. planes are also shadowing it. It's moving west into the Atlantic near Portugal. And it had been on combat duty in the Mediterranean Sea. The crew is currently pumping diesel directly into the ocean. So that's going on. President Trump likely knows a lot more about subs. He puts out that the U.S. military is 25 years ahead of Russia and China in sub development. We have this from BREITBART. Yeah, President Trump has worked to take down the cost of pharma, making a deal with Pfizer that would lower the cost of drugs on Medicaid, Medicare Plus, and so that pharma prices inside the U.S. are in line with pharma prices in foreign nations. Plus, Pfizer is going to invest $70 billion in U.S. manufactured pharma, and President Trump then gives to Pfizer no pharma tariffs. So that's going on. Way to go, President Trump, to help the American people. President Trump has also made a move to bring about Nesara. Now, Nesara is a program inside the U.S. that would give us a lot of things. It would do away with the IRS, which President Trump practically could do, and change the IRS to keeping track of tariffs, providing money for the American government. And we have this from Steve Quayle's aggregate site, Wine Press. So under Nesara, IRS would go away. American citizens would receive all tax money they had paid during their lifetime to the IRS. The IRS technically is not a legal operation. It is not part of the U.S. government, and it is not backed up by any U.S. law. Many American citizens now know this. So American citizens under Nesara would receive all the money they had paid into IRS. If you are your spouse has already passed, you'd also receive your spouse's money. And so toward this end, President Trump has brought in a blockchain system into SWIFT. Now, SWIFT is an international transfer of money system outside the BRICS. The BRICS nations have their own system. SWIFT operates in 200 nations. So President Trump has brought about this blockchain. One of the things necessary under Nesara is to have a blockchain quantum financial system. And also under Nesara, all debt would be forgiven. Like if you still owed money on your house, that debt would be forgiven. And the reason given for President Trump bringing about this blockchain financial system in SWIFT is to coordinate and be able to interact financially with other nations who have tokenization CBDCs. President Trump is also bringing about stable coin system. So under these changes, which will be bit by bit, eventually we'll get to our prosperity money for American citizens. But we do see with our own lying eyes President Trump putting a blockchain quantum financial system at one level. That's the SWIFT, transferring money internationally. This is expected to flow down into our banking system. And the U.S. will not have tokenization or CBDCs. We may have part of our government money in stablecoin or some form of Bitcoin, but American citizens under Nesara will receive our prosperity money. All the money we put into IRS, there are other avenues of revenue. But we see with our own lying eyes, we see President Trump making a step toward American citizens becoming rich. So way to go, President Trump. It's good to be in prayer for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, and I reasonably expect the U.S. military to be engaged in a hot shooting kinetic war-like situation within weeks in the Middle East and in Venezuela. Iran is a primary enemy of the U.S. Iran has its military in Venezuela ready to strike the U.S. Iran has sleeper cells inside the U.S. ready to kill American citizens. Venezuela, as I brought out on my previous video, controls, the Venezuelan military controls much of the cartels. And these Iran, Russia, China, Serbia, Cuba, Venezuela, and other nations were directly involved in the coup we saw in 2020. Make no mistake about it. These enemies are intent on killing American citizens, and they're intent on striking America in our homeland. So, Iran and Venezuela must be taken out. So it's good to be in prayer for a successful U.S. military strike. I love you, and I'll see you soon.